Why are UFOs and higher dimensional beings becoming such a hot topic, do you think?
Well, I think we can point to Ascension for sure. All kinds of new things are coming into Homo sapiens awareness.
So, welcome, Dr. Loren.
Thank you, Melissa. I sure do appreciate it.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. Let me just tell everyone how I met Dr. Cielo. So, Dr. Cielo has been on multiple channels, podcasts, and whatnot, but I actually discovered them through, I think, most of their students through some interviews you've done on the Gaia channel. And it's really interesting because it was at a time in my life that I was thinking about metaphysical stuff and is there more out there than what I have thought. And when I just listened to how authentic you sounded, and just you had this way about explaining things very simply and scientifically, I went, that's the person I'd like to learn from. So I've taken many courses from
Yes.
Dr. Cielo, and one of the courses that I took in their section on psychic training was on aliens, of all things. So I thought this would be a great time to invite somebody on to talk about, maybe UFOs from a higher dimensional perspective, or even just out of curiosity, some of the things that different people might be wondering about. Are they in our dimension? Are they not in our dimension? All of those things. So, Dr. Cielo, let me just ask you, why are UFOs and higher dimensional beings becoming such a hot topic, do you think?
Well, I think we can point to Ascension for sure. All kinds of new things are coming into Homo sapiens awareness. Even just what you mentioned about you finding the class at Golden Rose and taking it, right? Your awareness opened up, it fell in, and the rest is history. Of course, we're going to talk about the ant and the Homo sapien, right? The Homo sapien can see the ant. The ant has no idea about the Homo sapien. So that's what we're talking about. But really, when you think about it, humans and beings have been seeing things in the sky forever. I
Right.
think maybe because, think of it, the sky was the old Netflix, right? You'd sit around the campfire and, yeah, so I'm sure they saw a lot. Um, so I think one thing, probably the internet. I know how I I was an engineer and I had early access to the internet. So, oh my gosh, on my lunch break, I'm Googling, well, it wasn't Google back then, but, like
Right.
end of Mayan calendar, two, 2YK or whatever we called it, right? Um, yeah. So, I think that people's awareness, well, we're aware of so much, there's so much information coming at us. And I also do think with the military and now Congress and all that kind of stuff, we'll probably talk about that later. So it's, maybe I might say it this way, I think it's time to be aware of whatever they are, and we'll kind of poke around, and I'll try to read in real time, because I never have, what I think they are, so we'll see.
Yeah, there's just so many different ways that you can look at it, from a physical perspective, from a higher perspective. So I just find this, especially since so many people are curious about it, with, like you say, the government disclosures, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So, could you just briefly, just for our audience, kind of give an overview about what would we consider an extraterrestrial versus an angel versus an ascended master, that type of thing?
Yeah. Well, I first of all, the dividing line between typical spirit guides and angels, this is my line in the sand. Angels don't incarnate. They find no benefit whatsoever in taking any kind of physical form. So we can kind of set them to the side. Ascended masters are a completely different category, meaning that They have incarnated a lot of times. And at one point, they realized that the reality that they were in wasn't real. So no longer would they go back to that reality. For example, the big one, Jesus. Jesus would not incarnate back here anymore. And just the same with everybody watching. There's realities that you're an ascended master from. You would never incarnate in that reality again. Now, when I poke at extraterrestrials, first of all, I think the name is interesting. And I'm a kind of, I fancy myself a wordsmither. So, extraterrestrial. Well, the guides, like you said, they fall under that umbrella, right? Ascended
Right.
masters and archangels or angels. Yeah, they are not terrestrial. But when I was taking a quick peek, when I saw some of the topics we were going to discuss, I really think they're a different category. Right. And if we were to talk metaphysics, what I'm really saying is the contracts are different, right? Our higher self will contract in with what we think of as an ascended master or an angel to help us live through other contracts that it's written, right? They kind of kick us in the chakras, right? To get us to do
Exactly.
stuff. Yeah, I think this extraterrestrial group has different contracts, and I'm not sure that they often write specific contracts with specific higher selves, the individual person. I think they have kind of a bigger scope that they're looking at. And we'll just say the A word now, Ascension. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of been my experience too. With the few that I've worked with as guides, it seems like that's really the only thing they're focused on. I don't get them for day-to-day
Right.
stuff.
E.T., give me a parking place. I'm like,
I
no, I
know.
don't think.
They'd be careless. No. So a lot of times when you're online and different people talk about, if they've worked with these types of beings, you know, they'll talk about them maybe being on spirit councils, or maybe they've only seen them in an individual base. Do you have any experience or any thoughts about how they work with us?
I would kind of think it would be more than one. I kind of do adhere to kind of a council type arrangement. And even if you're not psychic, right? You and if you followed the UFO phenomenon, right, you probably heard that they closed down nuclear warheads. You actually go into the equipment and stop nuclear. So you kind of think that they're trying to save us from ourselves, right? Yeah. So, yeah, I do think their purpose is different, and I do think they work in groups. I really do.
That's kind of been what I've seen as well, just the few times I've seen that type of thing. And what's really interesting to me is when I've seen them together in a group is that they're not all extraterrestrial. They often I will see them with other beings that probably have been from here, more like an ascended master, that type of thing. So very interesting how they're here for different things. So how would you say that we might communicate with another being from another dimension, another place? How would we do that?
Well, let's talk about the experiences that we've heard people tell us. Because I know when you hear somebody saying, well, they said all of this information to me in my mind and so fast. And that's us reading. That's our experience when we read. Like
Right.
sometimes I can't talk fast enough. If you ever, yeah, all the clairvoyants I know, sometimes the information's coming so quickly and all at once that you're just talking as fast as you can to get it out of you. So, and I think the people who are communicating those stories to us, sometimes they call it telepathy, right? I would probably say it's probably more clairaudience or claircognizance because it's such a lot of information all at once. Like you just know this whole thing that they're trying to communicate to you. So if you're psychic, right, whatever you think that means, You could probably speak to them just the way you speak to any other what we categorize in the big beings without bodies, and that's probably been your experience.
Yeah. Although the first one I ever encountered was for somebody else. So that was really interesting to see in a reading. I mean, I don't normally see other people's guides pop in when I'm reading, sometimes, but not very often. And then this one came in and I went, oh, well, hello. What are we doing? It's a bit of a surprise. Um,
Right.
which is kind of interesting because then it makes me think. So for something of that nature, would that be a being that's in a higher dimension, or is it somebody that within our own dimension that's just communicating through, like you say, through telepathy? I'm interested to see what your take is as to, are they in our actual reality or are they in a higher dimension? What are your thoughts?
I think they probably move back and forth like most of our guides do, right? And that's always been a very interesting thing to me. Like, again, without going into a metaphysical dissertation, our higher self signed contracts with guides to help us live through other experiences that our higher self wants. So, my question is, well, what is special about those beings that they can come here into this reality and shift us to get it that our higher self can't do itself? So that's kind of an interesting thing to me. So I think that they probably move. Okay, let me say it this way: they move from the astral plane into this reality, and for me, they move into other realities too. So if we're calling other, different realities dimensions, then yes, they're interdimensional. Um, I would think that all of the guides and angels we work with would technically be interdimensional, moving through from one reality to the other. I just have to say this because, again, I was an engineer. So, and like you mentioned, I come at this whole psychic thing from a very analytical
Right.
standpoint. And I love The Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch. If you have, oh, if you haven't had a chance to see that, they do scientific experiments on this ranch in Utah. And what I find so interesting is that there's something over the ranch in the air that they can't see with their naked eye. And this is so much to me like clairvoyance. I would
Oh,
love to go there and focus my clairvoyant awareness on what is in the sky above it. They shoot rockets into it and all kinds of crazy stuff, right? So check out that show if you're interested in this topic. But yeah, I think I would say they're interdimensional, but I would say there's probably a lot of beings that are.
yeah. Fascinating. Yeah, I've actually heard of that show, but I don't think I've ever watched. Oh, Field Trip. I think this calls for a field trip. Is there any crystals we could mine while we're there? I'm sure there are. Oh my goodness. So, well, okay. So then now we've taken it from a spiritual perspective, right? From how we might see them. Why do you think the government now is starting to disclose some of the sightings that they've encountered, whether that be their Air Force personnel or other information they're privy to? Why do you feel like that's coming out now, or why it's increasing?
Probably our tech. The musical band Foo Fighters, everybody's probably have heard of the Foo Fighters. Well, they named themselves after these balls of light that the World War II airplane pilots saw. They call them Foo Fighters because they would get up to them and they would just go right through them. They couldn't figure out what they were. But there wasn't a, like now, I live in San Diego, and one of the famous military videos was shot here, and the weapons apparatus
Mhm.
locked onto it and was, like if you could shoot it, of course, as soon as it did, it went so fast out of the way, but it was recorded. Right, it was
Wow.
recorded. Yeah, so I think because there's so many planes in the air now, and the recording tech is so advanced, it's kind of hard not to, acknowledge that something is out there.
Right.
So, yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah.
It's
It's kind
just
of hard to
for,
keep a secret nowadays, you know? It's like feels like a lot of things are suddenly being revealed that we weren't anticipating, and then it's like, oh, we're going to talk about that now, even though people have been, suspicioning for a while. I find that fascinating. You've talked in the past about wormholes. Do you think there's a possibility of interdimensional travel through wormholes?
so if we're talking about um moving from one place of this reality into another. So that when I say this reality, what I mean is everything that was created as a result of the Big Bang, if it really happened. Now I know the scientists are starting to doubt their theory on the Big Bang now, of all things. But so as far as you could go in a spaceship, okay, so I do believe there's wormholes. I really do, because Einstein told me. Right?
There you
So I
go.
so I do think that you can get from point A to point B in this reality by bending time and space. Like everybody sees the way they show a paper and then they bend the paper over and stick the pencil through it. If you've watched any shows for us dummies that don't understand time and space and wormholes. So yes, I do think that it's possible to move. And I think that's what's happening at Skinwalker Ranch. I think it's definitely a wormhole that can't be seen. Yeah.
Wow. That's kind of cool when you think about it. Have you ever had any experiences with ETs?
Well, first of all, I'm of a certain age where it was really scary, right? All the early UFO stories were really, really scary. So I often ask myself, if I saw something come out of the sky and land in my backyard, would I go out there? And the answer is still no. No, I don't think I would. Right? I might try to clairvoyantly read them from the protection of my bed with my
I was going to
covers up,
say the
like,
safety of your own home.
yeah. But I will say I would like to share a story that happened to me that I think this story might illustrate maybe some of the other experiences that people have had. So it was the eve of my 60th birthday a few years ago, and I was laying in bed and my bed started to shake. And I've been born and raised in Southern California. So I thought, oh, it's an earthquake. Right. And then all of a sudden I went flying out the window. I was like, oh, this is a different experience. And so all of a sudden I'm in outer space, and the sensation, the physical sensation, was one of being pushed from behind and falling at the same time. And it was so intense that I remember thinking, who's ever pushing me, I hope they know how much a Homo sapien body can take before it like explodes or something. But I wasn't afraid the whole time. Right. It
Right.
wasn't until it was over that I had to, like we would say, blow some fear pictures. But so as I was being pushed from behind and falling, the falling was such an intense sensation. All of a sudden I was coming around this really big glowing object, huge. And I was about to come around it. And all of a sudden in the experience, I'm like, I can't take it anymore. And I turned to look who was around me, and I woke up in bed.
Oh, wow.
I remember I looked at the clock because I thought, oh my God, what if I've lost like 7 hours? What are my friends going to say? What are all my students going to say when I've been abducted? Right? That went through my mind. Oh my gosh, what about my friends and family? Right? So I asked my healing master, the infamous Ankiaya. If you've ever seen me on other things, you always talk about him. So I'm like, what in the heck was that? And he goes, well, what you were experiencing was when you were born 60 years ago. And that sensation was coming from the astral plate. If I would have kept going, that was our sun. If I would have kept going, I would have seen Earth around the sun, but I was too chicken.
I
So,
love it.
so a lot of that experience, I could see why. But again, I didn't have the paralysis. I mean, I was gone, right? Like, really what had happened is I was in my astral body. That was what we would say, right? Experiencing what it's like to leave the astral plane and come into this reality, waiting for your mom to squirt you out. Yeah. So that was really interesting. I've never had an experience like that before. It was one of those weird. I don't think anything weirder than that has ever happened to me. So that really stuck out. So no, I haven't seen, something land and something get out of it and interact with them. I really kind of put extraterrestrials into the non-physical category. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have to say I haven't really either, other than seeing them, in readings or if they, something of that nature. I did get the opportunity one time with a group to do a trance channel experience, and that was that was wild. That was
Wow.
wild because the energy was so different than what I
Yeah.
normally experience with anything else, and I just went, "This feels really unusual," but it was
Yeah.
cool. I mean, I do find that there are some people though that have a lot of fear over this topic. I mean, you can just it's like saying ghosts and they'll just they just get really really anxious. So if you ran across somebody like that that was just really fearful of this topic, what insight would you have for them?
Well, I think I would go back to the Bible. And it says very clearly in the Old Testament that any time an angel of Yahweh came to the earth and talked to a human, it scared the crap out of them. Right? In the Bible, it says they fell on the ground. They were so afraid. Right? So I think it's maybe a natural physical reaction to seeing something, interacting with something that different. And of course, it depends on how aware you are of them. As I mentioned, our guides and angels are working on us all the time, but not enough to really get our attention. So I have this funny story to tell you. So I've been to really haunted places, right? I've tried to seek out haunted places. And I went to the Queen Mary that's docked up in Long Beach. It's a ship, and it's supposed to be super haunted. I got a VIP tour to go
Oh,
down in the. I mean, it's actually where that big boat goes like this under the water. I think it's the bow. It was all rusty and creepy, right? And I'm like, do I feel anything? Do I feel anything? No. And so after I left, I said to Anki, I said, how come I never experience anything? Right? He goes, well, this is what he said to me. He said, I am right on the other edge of your awareness. So wherever I'm aware of, Ankiyaya is right over that boundary, not letting anything come in that would scare me back to being an engineer. So I was like, oh, that might be a good idea.
very smart. Very smart.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so, as far as being afraid, just in general, right? Like afraid of surviving, or I always try to pull back to a really big perspective. And our soul has incarnated so many times, and it will incarnate so many more times. Every single body that you have been attached to has died except this one, and it will. So that's kind of my take on fear of survival.
Perfect. I love it because I think that that's a great way to look about anything really that we have a lot of fear about. So we talked a little bit about, the increase that we've seen and of course our own experiences and a little bit about the ascension process. What kind of so we've talked about how they might prevent us from setting off a nuclear bomb and affecting ourselves and everybody else in the universe. Do you have any theories about how they play into the ascension process?
Well, I guess it would depend on the individual contracts. Now, if we're talking about a global event, right? It's probably best to realize that every single higher self who is incarnate at the time or will incarnate after that event has to be in agreement for that event to happen. The pandemic is a perfect example, right? If one higher self would have said, nope, I don't agree with this, either they would leave the planet, they would end their incarnation because the group agreement is changing on the planet. So either they would leave or it wouldn't have happened. Okay. So I think the same thing is true with the potential that we've acquired to really commit suicide, right? So um if enough of the higher selves want this reality to not to incarnate, not to have it be a viable, well, let's just say Earth. I mean, we're not going to annihilate the whole universe. There's going to be other landing pads out there, right? Then this group that we're calling extraterrestrial would let it happen. They would absolutely would. But if that's not the group agreement, then they're going to intercede. It won't happen. Right. So, and I woke up this morning. This is really interesting. I woke up at 2 o'clock. Every time I wake up at 2 in the morning, I always know something's up. And I was so sad. I was so sad. I was grieving. I've been working, I do this weekly current events healing meditation and been doing it for since 2016. So 8 years? No, more than that. Anyway, um, trying to keep us from doing things like that, right? Trying to raise the vibration of everyone on this planet all the way out to the edges of the universe. And I woke up this morning and I was so sad. I'm like, so so the stuff that I'm witnessing, like in my heart says, it doesn't have to be this way. And then my head clicks in and goes, oh, yes, it does. It wouldn't be happening if it didn't have to be this way. So I'm having this conflict between heart and head, right? And it's painful. I love the earth. It's so beautiful. I love the earth. So I just hope that the higher selves decide to, preserve Mother Earth. Yeah.
I know in the past you've talked about in other things that I've listened to about Lemurians. Are there any particular alien races or things that you've looked into, or you have interest in, or you have insight about?
I love Adama. I have loved Adama since I first met him. I call his energy Jesus on steroids. And of course, for those of you that don't know Adama, he's a Lemurian high priest. And I don't know, when I work with him, his energy is just so resonates with me. So he's the main Lemurian that I work with. Um, so, but I do see Lemurians come into readings. And I haven't seen one in a long time. That means I probably will now that I said that. But they show themselves in a certain way to me. Although this is not how the artists portray, because I printed one out and I have it hanging in my bedroom of
Uh-huh.
Adama. But when they come into a reading, they have really elongated heads. And that's, I'm like, oh, you're Lemurian. Now, they don't have bodies. So they're creating an appearance for me. And so in my reading space, an elongated head means Lemurian, right? So, we're part of the same crystal group, right? The same monthly
Mhm.
crystal group. And we just recently did Lemurian seed crystals. And the thing that tickled me the most about it is that where the name came from, where so supposedly there was this other continent that sunk or something, based on lemurs, cats, that they had similar breeds of cats, but there was no way for them to get across unless there had been land there. And so the guy who was studying them called it Lemuria. So I love tidbits like that. So yeah, Adama's my guy. He's my main Lemurian.
Awesome. I think I've seen a couple different types. I don't know really what their names are. The first one I saw looked like a like a grasshopper just
Oh,
standing on their
wow.
back legs. I went, well, that's interesting. But
Got your attention.
I have seen the elongated heads. That actually just happened recently. And I was like, and they were kind of showing me, actually, it was a being that I knew as an incarnation on Earth. And I think they were just showing me that they had been
I
elsewhere
see.
too. It wasn't just the same. And I thought that's really fascinating. Never really bothered to think about it. I thought that was kind of cool. Well, what are your thoughts on what people say star seeds or human hybrids? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Let me take a peek at that. I'll talk about human hybrids. I think we're talking DNA with that one. And with all this stuff going on in the country about there's only two genders, male and female. Well, I read this article about this guy and totally presented male, right? And he wanted to do his genetics, his family tree. So he swabbed his mouth, sent it in, and they called him. And they said, you put male on your, did someone else touch your swab? He's like, no. And then what they finally told him is he's actually has the genetics of a female. And so there's so many variations of our DNA. And those variations are prolificating, let's say. So I would think that just like, GMO vegetables, right? Like I'm a vegetarian. And so when you start putting animal genes in my tomatoes, now all of a sudden I'm not a vegetarian anymore. So I do think there's a lot of things that are hybrids. I bet if we really did a DNA analysis on any individual, we would see some what might be called mutations, but I know that's got a weird connotation to it. So yeah, I do think there's hybrids, and I just read that clairvoyantly. Star seeds, I don't get much of a hit on really. Maybe we're all star seeds.
Right? I mean, when you think about it, if we all came from source,
Yeah.
that's kind of something that when someone asks me about, if they have a lot of fear about aliens or anything that's different, it's so funny because I feel like it's very timely because it reminds me of our fear that we have with people on our own planet that we don't fully understand and we try to alienate
Yeah.
or use specifically, right? And so I just always say, listen, everything everything has different vibrations you see in the own human race where there's some of us that are very low vibrating and some of us are very high vibrating and you
Yeah.
can't be afraid of everything just because
Right.
of one experience. So
That's true.
I don't know. I have theories, but obviously there's no concrete evidence. But I always love to talk about it and see what other people's take are on the subject. I find it fascinating the more people that I talk about in our field when we start talking about readings or different things, how this topic will come up, and I'm like, I never really thought that this was as widespread through the metaphysical community as it is. But surprisingly, I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that will do readings or mediumship or whatever, and they'll like, oh yeah, I have those beings come in regularly. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
that's fascinating. I'd really never thought about that when I went into this field. So thank you. Thank you, Dr. Loren, for jumping in and talking about this really unusual topic, but I find it fascinating, so I hope that you would as well.
I do.
If you would, could you take just a few moments? Everyone, I just want to let you know that Dr. Cielo has a wonderful program to teach people about psychic training, getting in touch with your gifts. One of the wonderful things that I think that you teach is that everybody has the ability to tap into their intuition. I highly recommend their program. So if you could just tell them a little bit about your business, what you offer, and yeah, let's go with that.
Yeah, so my main platform is goldenrosepsychic.com, but you have to spell psychic correctly or you won't find it. Um, on there, you'll see my services. Some are live on Zoom, some are email recordings. You'll see the training. And by the way, Our host is a teacher at Golden Rose, so there you go. You might take some of her courses. Um, so kind of the big one that everybody's interested in is the 6-month clairvoyant program. And it's 24 classes. We start at the beginning, and by the fourth week, you're reading. So really basically you learn to read all kinds of different things like the chakras, the aura, the astral plane, the akashic records, what we were talking about, beings, guides, angels, and extraterrestrials. Um, so there's also a lot of 4-week classes that kind of get your feet wet if you're not sure you want to take a 6-month program. There's really 2 programs every year, so depending on when you see this podcast, you might want to jump over and click the training tab and see when the next one is going to start. But one of the things I'm really interested in now is the ascension of the planet. So if you go to the website, look across the main menu for Lightworkers Survival Guide. Okay, there's a lot of free meditations that you might help hold our planet in that highest and best frequency so that it does continue in a forward leaning fashion. Also, if you're struggling with either what's happening in your life or what's happening around you or a combination of both, there's meditations there. It's free. So check it out. Light Workers Survival Guide. So yeah.
Beautiful. And you may think you're going because you're interested in psychic work. And let me tell you, it is not about just that. Your life will change, literally. Letting go of fear, pictures, things that you have accumulated over time. And it's just so much more than just being able to tap into your intuition. It really is life changing. So I highly recommend this program. And yes, I do teach there as well. I've always been fascinated with being without body communication. So, funny enough, here we are talking about that today. What a surprise. All right. Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. And I hope all of our listeners have an opportunity to check out your website and take advantage of some of those resources. So, thanks
Oh,
again.
my friend, thank you so much for the opportunity. Thanks for all you do.